And I'll take roll call attendance from Alford, Charlie Ketchen.
Here.
Lucy Prashker's here. From Egremont, George McGurn.
Here.
Tom Burkle.
Here.
Danelle Kelly. Deb Phillips.
Here.
From Great Barrington, Peter Taylor.
Yes.
Stephen Bannon.
Here.
From Monterey, Don Coburn.
Here.
John Silbert.
Here.
Laura Rodriguez. From New Marlboro, Susan Smith.
Here.
Tara White.
Here.
Jane Burke. Hi, Jane.
Here.
From Sheffield, Colin Smith.
Here.
Nadine Hover.
Here.
Bonnie Silvers.
Here.
From Stockbridge, Nick Fredsel. Patrick White. Sean Stephen.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. And from West Stockbridge, Marie Ryan.
Here.
Roger Kavanaugh.
Here.
And Molly Thomas. Molly's on. I see you. Are you muted, Molly? You're not muted, but can anyone else hear Molly?
Nope.
No.
No.
Molly, you want to go out and come back in? Okay. All right, first item on the agenda. Oh, there's Patrick. Patrick just joined. Patrick White.
I'm here.
Great, thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the April 12 minutes, which Mary circulated. Did a really good job capturing what all of us said. I know it was long, but I thought it was helpful to read through all that. I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Who is that? Who made the motion?
Yep.
Deb. And Tara, did you second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion of the minutes? Corrections? Okay, so I'll call for a vote on the minutes. Charlie Ketchen,
Yes.
George McGurn,
Yes.
Tom Burkle,
Yes.
Deb Phillips,
Yes.
Peter Taylor,
Yes.
Steve Bannon,
Yes.
Don Coburn,
Yes.
John Silbert.
Yes.
Laura's joined us now. Laura, did you have a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes, they look good.
Okay, great. Susan Smith,
Yes.
Tara White,
Yes.
Jane Burke,
Most of the nation were at a high level of COVID
Yes.
cases.
Colin Smith.
I abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Okay. Nadine,
Yes.
Bonnie Silvers,
Yes.
Patrick White. Patrick, vote on the minutes.
Yes.
Sean Stephen,
Yes.
Marie Ryan,
Yes.
Roger Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Molly Thomas.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is the contract for the Abrams Group. I'm sorry we didn't get that circulated before. I don't know, Jake, if you got a chance to send that out, but it's a simple form of agreement, the same form of agreement that we've used with our other consultants. It's for the period April 1, 2022 through June 30, 2022, at an hourly rate of $150 an hour for up to 50 hours with a cap of $7,500. And Jake, maybe you can explain how Matt and Mark's work has been funded up to this point and why we're now moving over to having the funding come from the planning board as opposed to the task force.
Yeah, sure. So work that Mark and Matt have done, which has been incredibly important to the research team's fiscal analysis, has been paid to date 100% on the task force side. So the Regional School District Planning Board funds have not been used to pay for the Abrahams Consulting Group, including the work that happened most recently. However, we needed a short contract just to make sure we were covering hours. We're actually over hours a bit right now, so we owe them some hours. And we were covering hours through the facilitation process and then any follow-up that was required from the board. So because Sarah Carlton is likely not going to be spending her hours on the contract that was approved, my request to Lucy was that we in effect shift the funds from that contract to cover the Abrahams. So normally this would come through the project management subcommittee, but because we don't have one on the horizon, we thought we would bring it to the full board. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. So again, it's up to 50 hours, capped at 7,500. We have the power to terminate at any time for any reason upon written notice, which is a provision we have in all of our contracts. So I'd ask for a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Okay, who made the motion?
Charlie.
Oh, thank you. And Nadine seconded it.
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion? Jane, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering, going forward with whether the finance committee is able to work directly with the Abrahams through this contract if they have particular questions, or any other of the subcommittees, the project management team, or is it all controlled from Jake's side?
Yep, I got it.
The finance subcommittee has always had the ability to work with any of our consultants directly, as have our other subcommittees. So I don't see that changing in any way. Any other discussion? Hi, Beth.
Hello.
Okay, seeing no, let me just check. I have the wrong thing up. Seeing no additional hands, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of approving the contract with the Abrahams Group. Charlie.
Yes.
George.
Abstain.
Tom Burkle.
Yes.
Deb Phillips.
Yes.
Peter Taylor. Peter.
Yes.
Steve Bannon.
Yes.
Don Coburn.
Yes.
John Silbert.
Yes.
Laura Rodriguez.
Yes.
Susan Smith.
Yes.
Tara White.
Yes.
Jane Burke.
Yep.
Colin Smith.
Yes.
Nadine Hover.
Yes.
Bonnie Silvers.
Yes.
Patrick White.
Yes.
Sean Stephen.
Yes.
Marie Ryan.
Yes.
Roger Kavanaugh.
Yes.
And Molly Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, great. So before I turn the floor over to our facilitators, I want to say a couple of words about item 5 on the agenda, which is a possible vote on a preferred option. I don't know whether a motion will be made tonight. I know that there are some who are ready to move forward to a vote tonight. I know there's also a view that we should wait. It's a decision that the board will need to make tonight if a motion is made. I do want to explain procedurally how things will work were a motion to be made. Once a motion is made, I'm going to need to resume my role as chair to chair the discussion of the vote and the vote itself. So the facilitated discussions led by our facilitators would end at that point. So as a result, I would ask that any board member wait to make any motion until after all of our panel members, including our union representatives and the superintendents, have had an opportunity to speak during the facilitated part of the discussion. If a board member does make a motion, and if another board member feels that no vote should be taken at this time, that board member, the one who feels no vote should be taken at this time, could make a motion to table the original motion. And once seconded, a motion to table takes precedence over the original motion. And so we would then have a discussion on the motion to table and a vote on the motion to table. If the motion to table carries by a majority vote, the original motion will be tabled. If the motion to table is defeated, we will then move to vote on the original motion. I just want to remind people what a vote today would mean. It would not be a vote on the board's formal recommendation to be delivered to the respective select boards for votes by town residents. That vote can't happen until we have a proposed 8-town regional school district agreement to present to town voters, which we obviously don't have yet. Rather, this vote would be a vote to select from among the 7 scenarios presented a preferred option for further development and design. As I described at our last meeting, a specking out, so to speak, of a regionalization model prototype, which would include further analysis of the selected model and eventually the drafting of a proposed regional school district agreement. Again, we don't know whether we will get there tonight, but I wanted to outline the process in the event a motion to select a preferred model is made. Finally, Mary circulated a set of FAQs that the research team prepared that collates and organizes by topic the questions that the research team has received thus far. I'm hoping the group finds those FAQs helpful, together with the evaluation tools that were earlier circulated. And I hope that we can use those in the evaluation of the models tonight. And the research team does plan to post the current draft of the FAQs on the website after this meeting. Anything you want to add, Jake, before I turn the floor over to the facilitators?
No, just I did want to point out that we're going to, we built a web page for the FAQs that'll be organized by topic. And then when you click on the topic, it'll drop down the questions so that people they won't be overwhelmed with the entire document. They can kind of focus on the questions that are most relevant to them. So I'm hoping that format will be useful to people. That's probably the only thing I wanted to mention. So what you all got was a PDF. We'll be converting that to a more dynamic form online.
Okay. Jane has her hand up. Peter Taylor, do you have anything to add before we get to Jane?
I'm all set, thanks.
Okay, Jane?
I did some research on the question of our vote, and we also have the option of a postponement of a vote, which allows for more discussion and setting up a time period, because tabling may be less advantageous for us. So I just wanted to ask you, Lucy, if you would entertain a motion to postpone rather than a motion to table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think whatever motion is made can specify what the movement wants in terms of either the tabling or postponement of the vote. So yeah, that would be fine.
Thank you.
All right, Cindy and Annie, you are up. Oh, Jane, your hand's down. Okay. Cindy and Annie, you are up. Please take us away.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. This is our final scheduled session with you. So we're going to try to walk you through the rest of the discussions on this, and then see where time and thoughts are at when that discussion concludes. So when we left off last time, we were talking about the 3 scenarios in Model A. I'd like to continue those questions. Or that discussion. I think that it might be beneficial, because there were so many questions asked the last time, that we could focus the discussion around the topics of the questions. For example, Jake's group has it broke out as voting questions. Use those as the basis for to at least to kickstart the conversation on the 3 models that are taking. Now, Lucy just went over the vote, so I don't know if there's any additional discussion on that vote. It didn't seem to me like there was. There were no further hands, but certainly if there questions arise, we can, absolutely entertain those questions. So with that, the next section that is broken out is the high school location construction questions. Who is 8 Towns?
That's Mary. Can I just interrupt for a second,
Yes.
Cindy, and find out what's going on with Mary?
So we have a board member in the Danelle is in there. Danelle will have to accept that promotion, but I just wanted to make sure you knew they were present.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say something. That's why I had my hand raised. I looked at the list and I'm like looking at the list of board members and why is she here?
So Danelle, if you can accept the promotion, then you can be part of the panel set. That would be great. And one thing I just wanted to ask Cindy was whether we were going to ask the superintendents, sorry about that noise, ask the superintendents if they wanted to speak at all to the question Peter Taylor had raised at the end of our last meeting about the middle school structure and philosophy.
Yes, I was just trying to give people a general idea of how we might try to organize the discussion tonight. But I wanted to kick that off with an invitation to both Peter and Beth, the superintendents, regarding Peter's question from last week surrounding the middle school. Peter, do you want to set the stage with that by reiterating what it is you'd like to discuss have the superintendents discuss?
Sure. The question came at a part of the discussion where we were discussing Model A scenario 3, which has the recommendation of merging the middle school, and it surfaced that the 2 districts currently have different grade ranges and seeming philosophies around middle school. And so my point was that if we were going to thoroughly evaluate that option, as there was some energy around the table to do so, we needed to better understand the middle school philosophies and what impacts bringing the middle school under one roof would have in terms of the 2 districts' approach to middle school education. The report is largely silent on that, even though I know Jake has some references to that. It was not really in the scope to dig into that. So I wanted to have the board benefit from further explanation.
Okay. And I think that was that makes perfect sense to start with that because there were a lot of questions around and concerns voiced around the merger of the middle schools into a regionalized area. So Peter or Beth, I invite both of you or either of you to weigh in on that question if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about it. I would like to put it in the context, though. If what I'm going to share is one piece of what probably is a very complex puzzle, and if we were to move forward, there'd probably be many more discussions, hours in length, about what our current goals and missions are individually, and what our shared aspirations might be together. So I can share a piece of the puzzle, but I don't think it totally gets to the bigger questions that are posed. The most obvious difference is a structural one, that our middle school is 5th to 8th grade. And I inherited that when I got here, and in some ways I think it was at least initially informed by convenience. 2 new schools were built at the same time, and one was pre-K to 4 and the other was 5 to 8. 5 to 8 is an unusual configuration in school settings. That they're not tons of them. And the question is always, should the 5th graders be part of a middle school, or should they be the older edge of a elementary school? So that's one piece. Our stated mission is similar to many schools' missions. There are 4 or 5 bullet points. One's around personal and academic excellence. One's around student responsibility. One's around respect and responsibility, which is a classic middle school like dyad or balance. One's around inquiry, and then the third one is building a foundation and engaging in lifelong learning and community service. I think more recently we've made a very big investment in social emotional learning and restorative practices, and those 2 areas of work aren't fully reflected in our mission, but they are reflected in our school improvement plans, and in a post-COVID world, particularly the social emotional learning, but also the restorative practices are more relevant than ever. I could go on and on. I think one other thing that's worth noting is until quite recently, the school was named Monument Valley Regional Middle School, and a little more than a year ago, it became the W.B. Du Bois Regional Middle School. And there's a lot in that the community has come to celebrate. And I think that includes a lot of work around social justice. So hopefully that gives enough context. And I want to be cognizant of not taking all the time of this group talking about it.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Sure.
Beth, I open it up for an opportunity for yourself.
Sure. So this is kind of a incredibly large topic, as Peter said, to try to do a quick summary. So we convened a middle school task force and studied middle school models for about 2 years. So there is some data on our website about the work that we did with community members, teachers, students, faculty members from several years ago. So I'll do my best to sum up some of the key findings and reasons for our reconfiguration to 6, 7, 8, maybe the highlights. So what we found was that the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of sixth graders were more developmentally appropriate in a secondary or a middle school setting. Their maturity, they were more mature, I should say, too mature for their elementary peers in some ways. And we found more growth with sixth graders being mentors to their fellow elementary students. And we found less developmental and behavioral issues as a result. Probably the biggest and most important driving factor was basically that the state standards are aligned 6, 7, 8. So fifth grade students tend to benefit from a contained classroom model with longer blocks in ELA and math still developmentally, where sixth grade is ready for more of a rotational option. And we felt very strongly that this was an opportunity to prepare middle school students with skills that will help them be successful in high school, things like organizational skills, study skills. And we wanted the middle school experience to be more exploratory from the get-go. So for one example would be all middle school students take foreign language, they take French and they take Spanish, and then they decide which one they want to pursue. So we tried to do that with a variety of subjects, getting kids ready for what they might be interested in as they move to their high school experience. So, I mean, as Peter said, there's much, much more we could talk about. This was a lot of research and studying, but I think those were the major highlights as to why we made the decision we did.
Thank you, Beth. So the rest of the board and I want to be inclusive of the union representatives weighing in on this. So let's we'll, have some discussion on that. If you need clarification, have further questions. Don, I see your hand is up.
I made the mistake, perhaps, of doing research online, and I'd be interested in the superintendent's comment on what I came across. What I came across was only one formal study done by Duke University, which indicated, though it was a closed question, that their evidence showed that the sixth graders did better not being with the seventh and eighth graders. I'm wondering if that study is out of date or has been countered by other studies, and more specifically, what each of the superintendents thinks about where the sixth grade best belongs, in grade school or in the middle school.
Don, I'm not aware of the particular study you're referencing. When I worked in New York and we helped open 300 schools, we did it in every possible structure imaginable. And people figure out ways to have wonderful successes with the wrong structures and terrible failures with the right structure. So I don't think there's a simple answer to that. I think it's more about does a particular school or district articulate a coherent plan and do the things that they need to support it. So I did work on K to 3 schools, K to 5 schools, K to 6 schools, 7 to 12 schools, standalone high schools, and their successes in any possible structure. But it looks to me what supports success is a coherent and well implemented set of core beliefs and plans.
Okay, thank you. Jane, your hand is up.
Yes, I'll put my camera back on. I'm saving battery power by turning it off. I was on the team at Southern Berkshire that worked on the model. I'm a STEM educator, and I'm familiar with Beth's statement about the 6 through 8 standards for science are grouped. And from an academic point of view, it makes a lot of sense. And I don't think we're going to get into the weeds. I did a lot of research when I was on that subcommittee that considered this. And there are people who make a case for K-8 is the best model. And as Peter said, it really is how kids are treated and how things flow from one thing to another and how the faculty is oriented. I think the message that we got originally was that these kinds of decisions about how the academic programs were going to go was not up to the planning board. So I would hesitate to set up something that limits choices, because being in education for 54 years, things change at least every decade, if not every 5 years. So we would have to leave it up to whoever was in the leadership to decide what is the best practice for these kids who've been through pandemic and various other experiences, because it may not be the same as it was 5 or 12 years ago when your new schools were built. Peter, I don't know when that was, but I don't think we should be armchairing what the best choice is. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Lucy? You're on mute, Lucy.
I wanted to ask Beth, because it was a question raised in Jake's report, whether the 6th graders at Mount Everett are being taught by 1 or 2 teachers, which is sort of the elementary model, or whether they are, as you described, because they're ready for a rotational option, whether they're being taught by multiple teachers, more like a 7th and 8th grader. And I think, Rob, you took a look at that too. So I'd be interested to hear what your findings were.
Ideally, we would like a middle school team model. That's what we would ideally like. The realities of the size and our fiscal abilities to do that we have teachers at both the middle and high school level who teach cross grade levels. So you might have a high school teacher who teaches one middle school class or vice versa. So, but the idea is that you have, you're not still in the elementary model where you have one teacher, possibly 2. You're not rotating fully like you are in the secondary, but you have a team of 4 or 5 teachers that you work between. And that also allows the teams to really get to know the cohorts of students as they move through. So that's the type of model that we were aiming for.
Is that currently happening in 6th grade at your school?
Yes.
That there are 4 or 5 teachers teaching 6th graders?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Sean?
Yeah, Peter, maybe you can explain this. Isn't that exactly what we do at Berkshire Hills?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it. I'm trying not to talk too much. The 5th and 6th grade teachers are in a looping thing where they teach either 3 5th grade classes and 2 6th grade classes, or 2 5th grade classes and 3 6th grade classes. And then the 7th and 8th grade teachers are in the same thing. It sounds in some ways like it's very similar. It's a team structure. The teacher's total responsibility for kids is in the mid to high 80s, and there are a couple places where that's not the case. But yeah, it sounds in many ways quite similar.
Okay, thank you. Bonnie? You're on mute, dear. There you are.
Yep, I unmuted me. The thing I want to say, I was also on that committee that worked on the redesign of middle school, and a few interesting factors came out. One, the fact that it would really, the redesign based on state mandates, et cetera, would work toward really improving math results. Two, the teachers who were involved felt that there has been such a change in, for good or bad, maturation of children, that sixth graders were ready for this approach where you would have a team where you could work being in the upper school and that it would have an impact on behavior. Additionally, the design now allows for a number of culminating activities that are tied together, which is a sixth grade sort of know yourself, an eighth grade know your community, and I think it's, Beth will correct me, the last is in terms of the plan for the future. So the fact that this was addressed through a really intense period of study, and it was geared towards our communities. And it took a long time to come to an agreement. And I could say, I mean, I'm not in the buildings every day, but I really believe I've seen a real difference in terms of how our sixth graders behave, how they take part in the overall community and their performance as a result of this model. But I want to go back to the comment that Jane made. Ultimately, the design, curriculum, et cetera, is obviously not being made the decision here. But I think it's very important for us to consider the work that Southern Berkshire did in terms of establishing this model. Thanks.
Thank you, Bonnie. Roger?
Well, there were several hands up before me. If you
Well, on my screen you were next, but certainly if you want to defer to someone else, that's fine.
Yeah, I saw Colin, Rob, and Susan were raised hands before I put my hand up.
Okay. Rob, you want to go next?
Sure. I just quickly, I put.
Oh, you're muted again.
Okay, there we go. I just wanted to say that I have put together a descriptions that I was able to cull off of both the Berkshire Hills and Southern Berkshire websites about the different middle school programs that will be available to you probably tomorrow or sometime like that. But they actually go into the detail of the history. Essentially, Berkshire Hills has been a 5 through 8 since 2003-4 school year. Prior to that, it had been 6-8 back into 1994 and before that. The school configurations, essentially the paper I put together, which is a very short brief, describes the philosophies that are posted and also gives you the source documents that Beth mentioned. I have the source documents for the task force, and I basically summarize all of the task force findings and the implementations that they have, and then what the configurations look like, and that will be available. I imagine that Jake will say it's sometime this week, if not, yeah, most likely this week. Just wanted to say that's available for people so they can look at this at their own leisure.
Thanks, Rob. We'll take Colin, Susan, and then Roger.
All right, I had a two-part question. The first one's really straightforward. If we were to choose the where the 7-8 merges, is there room in the school building to do that, to bring the kids that are in Sheffield to Great Barrington? I assume that's what that means when we do 7 and 8. And I apologize, I missed last meeting, so if this was discussed then.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay, so there's enough room. So then my next question goes back to what Peter was saying earlier, or someone pointed out, well, isn't that what we're doing? Is Berkshire Hills, is it a matter of the label? In other words, they're doing what Southern Berkshire is doing, but they just don't have it labeled the same way. Is that, was I hearing that right? Or is it completely different? In other words, are you doing the same thing Southern Berkshire is doing? You're just not calling it the same thing.
I think it's too complex to respond to that thoughtfully.
Okay, fair enough.
Tonight. I imagine we're doing lots that overlaps and some that's different. And Beth, did you have thoughts on that?
Well, I guess I would question, I mean, I would not want to put the 6th grade students. So are we saying that there wouldn't be room for the 6th grade? I don't think our communities felt that they wanted 6th grade back in the elementary model, but I believe one of these versions is doing that. Correct?
That's correct. 8-3 moves grade 7 and 8 to Du Bois, and then grade 6 into Undermountain. So that's correct, Beth.
So I don't think we would be in favor of that configuration.
Thank you, Beth. Susan.
Yeah, thanks very much. When Christine Martin brought this up at the last meeting, I had no idea all that goes into structuring this. I'm not an educator. But is there any, looking down the road with what our population is, it appears to me that we're going to be addressing this issue, and that to make an informed decision now going forward to merge the high schools, I really think it's imperative that we look at these younger grades, because again, are the school districts going to be able to support individual 7th and 8th grades? But with that said, is it inappropriate? Can we not change the model to consider 6th, 7th, and 8th versus just 7th and 8th? I mean, it seems, again, that it wouldn't, to merge from 6 through 12, if that was a possibility. And I know we're getting younger and younger, and there's more transportation issues and all of that. But I think that the very bottom line, again, is we're losing the population. We're trying to do the best by our students. And it just seems to make sense that we should think as forward as we can about this. So I guess my short answer is, are we limited to this model, or is it something we could expand to explore 6th, 7th, and 8th?
Anybody able to address that or respond? Lucy?
The only thing I'll say is Lucy, do you want to speak or? No, all right. Yeah. I would say my answer to your question, Susan, is no, you don't have any limitations. If you all decided to move 6th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th from Southern Berkshire into Du Bois, you could do it. We as a research team made a decision around grade 6 to leave them in Southern Berkshire for a variety of factors, which I outlined in the FAQs and in the report, including, as you mentioned, transportation and sort of our considerations around travel time based on age. And again, as you've heard said over and over by both Peter and Beth, there's a lot of different ways to look at middle school. And as I mentioned in the last meeting, there's 6 different elementary configurations just in Berkshire County. And so 6th grade is often in elementary grades and often in middle grades. So So we made a decision to leave 6th grade in Southern Berkshire, primarily, as I mentioned, for those reasons. But to your point, they certainly could be moved to Du Bois.
Okay. Thank you. Lucy, did you have a response to that, to Susan?
Could I, before Lucy speaks, do you mind?
Sure, go ahead, Susan.
Oh shoot, now it just left me. I know that there's a huge amount of sensitivity about leaving the Southern Berkshire campus and bringing more students over to potentially the Berkshire Hills campus. So I don't, I guess I just want to say I understand that might be another stumbling block. And if there's I don't know, can think creatively to somehow work with the Southern Berkshire campus on that issue. I'm just throwing it out there. I've just realized it's another issue.
Thank you, Susan. Lucy, you had a response?
Yeah, I just wanted to frame up the issue a little bit. Why are we even talking about the middle school? The reason we're talking about the middle school is that A3 had 7 and 8 coming up to Great Barrington and 6th grade going into the elementary school at Undermountain. And as a result, the Mount Everett part of the facility would then be vacant and could be repurposed. So that's why we're into this. It's not that we want to insert ourselves, as Jane noted, that we want to insert ourselves into these heavily curriculum, educational leadership centered and focused decisions. It's just if we were to choose A3, that's what would happen under that particular scenario. Now, choosing A2 doesn't foreclose the ability of a future school committee and future administration to decide in the future to move 7 and 8 up, or to move 6, 7, and 8 up, or to do any number of things. The question is whether at this point in time, as between A2 and A3, if that's what folks are thinking about, which of those two options makes the most sense now as a first step. And it does seem to me that the added complexity, and I think this is the reason the research team chose A2 rather than A3 as their recommendation, the added complexity and all these issues about middle school philosophy sort of tilt the scale towards A2 as this initial step, leaving open the possibility that in the future, a school committee and the educational leadership of the merged district would make a decision to do more along the lines of what Susan Smith suggested.
Thank you, Lucy. We're going to go back. Roger, you've been patiently waiting, then Don, then Jane.
Okay, my comment is simply one about process. Since we spent probably 45 minutes almost talking about middle school philosophy, it would appear that the idea of merging grades 7 and 8 and dictating that as a scenario seems to be dead in the water. So my comment is that maybe we take scenario 3 just off the table, because it's pretty clear to me that would never sit well with anybody because of everything that's been talked about. And then we could narrow down our choices. Thank you.
Can certainly give feedback on that. Don?
Oh, I want to thank Bonnie and Jane and Peter and Beth for the information they supplied. And say this, I confess I don't know anything about education. That's something that's always made me nervous about being part of this group. So I was looking in my own, and I see the issue is very close as to where the 6th grade should be. But I was trying to find a principle, because of my training, to use to decide the issue. And so I did a little research. And if you're going to work change, there are 3 basic principles that are suggested. Listen to people. I think we've been doing that and will continue to do that. Explain. With Jake's help, I think we have been explaining and will continue to explain. The second principle is, if you want change, preserve as much of the familiar as possible. And based on that principle, I would agree with Roger that we ought to drop 3. I know I was for it before, but I changed my mind and focus on A2.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Jane?
I just want to make a short statement that I want us all to do what's best for children. We're thinking about our communities, our taxes, but middle school is the most volatile time, and it concerns me that those of us who are not familiar with education may be looking at what's been suggested by the research team and are not aware of the vulnerability of the students that we're working with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tara and then Colin.
I have a lot of comments about a lot of the stuff that's been said over the last couple times, but since we're focusing on this right now, I'll just do this one, and then if we have time or I want to, we can go back to some of the other comments of things that have been said in the last couple of facilitated meetings. But I'm not ready to take scenario 3 off the table. Even if we decide to go ahead with scenario 3, it's going to be many years out here before it's going to be implemented. And I think there's plenty of time to figure out what is the best process going forward to do that. I don't think that we're not making that decision today and it's going to happen tomorrow. Even if we work on this, it's going to be several years out. So I'm sure there'll be a way to figure out how to implement this going forward, and so that it could happen. So I'm not in favor of taking scenario 3 off the table. I think it could be worked out. I really do. I think if everybody put their head together and work together, again, I'm not familiar with all of that. I mean, when I was in school, 7, 8, it was 1 through 6, and 7, 8 was your middle, and then you went 9 through 12. And that's the way it was. So I'm familiar with that form of school. Of course, that was quite a while ago, but I just don't think that there's a reason to put the scenario to the side and not talk about it or not even consider doing it just because we think it can't happen. I think everybody's working towards the same ending here, and that it could be worked out, and you've got several years to do it. It's, as I said, it's not going to happen tomorrow. Thank you.
Right, so you're not in favor of not taking scenario 3 off the table for discussion? No. Okay, thank you. Colin?
I was just going to add, listening to what other people were saying, and I'm going to disagree with Tara here. I often think about how this is going to be perceived in the general vote when it gets out to all the towns. And I do think scenario 3 adds a complexity for people to comprehend. I get it. I'm not saying that it's a bad idea. I'm just saying that already in our discussion here, we have all spent a lot of time discussing it and trying to make heads and tails of it. and it may complicate things and therefore cause our bigger picture, which is to try to consolidate these two school districts, and it may cause a problem for that. So for that reason, I agree with I think it was Don that was saying, don't change too much. So I'm not leaning towards that scenario 3. I think it just adds too much complexity when I'm thinking about the general vote.
Thank you. Roger and then Danielle.
Colin said much of what I was thinking. My motivation or reason for suggesting taking it off the table, because I think it's the conversation has convinced me pretty much what Colin said, that this is going to be a real flashpoint. So why do we want to? I think if we continue to consider the way it's written down, 7 and 8 are merged on the Great Barrington campus. I think we're doing some damage to the overall program of trying to consolidate the districts. It's just a little bit too volatile for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Danielle?
Yeah, this will be quick because as I agree with Colin, Don, and I understand some of Tara's points, but I think taking it off the table, it's not just because we don't think it's going to work. We, like as Beth said, and as Jane mentioned, there's been studies done and referring to how the state models are. It's not like we just, think that 6, 7, 8 should go together. It's been studied and looked at extensively. So I'm, trying to wrap my head around even just a really long commute potentially for 9th through 12th graders coming up to Great Barrington. I can't, as a parent, I'm not an educator, but as a parent, and I know a lot of parents are concerned about the transportation times as well. So throwing the 7th and 8th graders into that realm is a little hard to swallow, I think. So yeah, that's in summary. I do agree with Colin.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any more hands. We haven't heard from the union representatives. I'd like to invite them an opportunity to weigh in.
I'll speak as a middle school teacher, and there have been, in my 20 plus years of education, there have been multiple models and multiple philosophies about what grades should go where. And I think that in the end, what has to matter is what's happening with students in front of us right now. And I said this in the last meeting, students are in a place in which they are incredibly fragile. So I think that especially 11 to 14-year-olds, the development that adolescents' brains are going through at that time, both the emotional pieces and the academic pieces, I do not think it would be wise to consider moving them at this point. And maybe in the future things could change, but I think that there's a lot that goes into a middle school model. A lot of research that talks about the teaming method, and to have 2 different groups at a middle school where you have a 5, 6 at one middle school, and then you introduce 7th and 8th graders from a different school. There's a lot of transitional pieces that would have to happen. And I think you're almost, despite it being a few years off, you're creating more work for trying to make all of this happen if you consider that at this moment. It may be a future conversation, but I just think that it's you're biting off more than you can chew at this point, is my opinion.
Thanks, Kimberly, for sharing that input. I'm sure the board appreciates it. Amy.
Hi, I teach elementary school at Berkshire Hills, so I don't have a lot of direct experience in the middle school, but From an elementary perspective, I just wanted to mention two things that I think are important. One, the population decline. These numbers are going to be fluid. Working in elementary, our numbers are certainly declining. So I think that has to be considered. And class sizes and even structures might very well have to change in the future. And as Kimberly just said, I think limiting transitions for all students is really important. Really important. So one change to a middle school, I think would be much more beneficial than multiple changes for any students at either district. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Amy. All right, we are still open for discussion on Model A, the 3 scenarios. I'm not seeing any additional hands. Are there any further questions? Don?
Well, I just have one comment. I think it was Tara White who suggested that we have time, years, to make this decision. And I don't think that is accurate if I understood what Lucy was saying correctly. I think we have to decide now which of these two options is to be intensely studied. And that's going to be decided either today or probably within a few weeks of today. So it's a present decision that has to be made. And I think, as Lucy said, we should keep in mind that as information develops, as education policy changes, there will be a regional board capable of reevaluating the situation in those two grades. Thanks.
Thank you, Don. Jane?
Did you just say that we were looking at scenario A, all three? There were no more questions, or is just this for the one about the middle school, just to clarify what you just said?
No, this discussion has been open for all 3 scenarios. It began with the middle school.
Oh, okay.
Discussion, and it has evolved, you know, a little broader than that, although it's still very inclusive of the concerns around moving around the middle school. Okay. So I am inviting discussion on the 3 scenarios within option A. If anyone has any comments or questions.
Well, in that case, I do.
Okay.
But I have I went through the report and the frequently asked questions, and I have really pages of concerns. So I'm not going to dominate this discussion. I think I should only be allowed to say one thing at a time, because my feeling for all of the scenarios in A, I don't feel comfortable that I have accurate numbers about cost savings. I don't feel comfortable that I know enough about transportation, because the transportation plan was worked out with the vendor who provides the transportation. We have had no one look at whatever the research team has put out to have second opinions on things. We've had assumptions about class size. We've had assumptions on what the funding will be. We've had assumptions about what the decline in enrollment is. There are a lot of assumptions in here that I feel need to have further study. Thank you.
I want to thank you for that. I think this is a good time just to reiterate what Lucy said earlier tonight when she started, and what she said last time, and what I had repeated, is that if there's a vote tonight or in the next few weeks, it is to decide on a single model to do a super dive into, which my understanding is that is where those things get flushed out. I think, Lucy, correct me if I'm wrong, you pointed out last time that even through that process, there are several opportunities for off-ramps.
Can I respond to that, Cindy, please?
I'm just reminding everyone what the vote would be. But
yeah,
absolutely,
well, I'd like to comment on that.
Sure.
Because I think picking a model before we have gone out to discuss this thoroughly with our communities and more people, frankly speaking, most people don't want to do the work to really dig deeply. And as soon as they hear a story that sounds okay, they're probably going to go for it. There are very few people who ask the good questions. So I am leery of putting out a model at all before we have a lot more information. I really appreciate all the work that has been done. It was stated in the beginning that these models were not static, that there's differences. I know that when we saw the first spreadsheets about the saving of money, it was not based on the cost of the new school. So I just would ask people to understand that as soon as we say we want to pursue one thing, it sends a message that we think it's all, that's where we're going, even though it's not. And I have about 20 things that I need more information on personally. And so I would really like to have some time to look more deeply into quite a few areas. Thank you.
Got it, Jane. Thank you. I showed Tom, Colin, and then Audrey. Tom Burkle?
Yes, thank you. My comments would go across the board for all three of the scenarios. A couple of questions have been turning in my mind. As we look at any of these models, are we true to the original intent of the two school committees? Have we held close to what they originally signed on to look at? And then the other parts of my comments are probably concerns. I am looking at the data in the report, and I'm following the threads of the reports within the reports within the reports. And there's a ton of information there, and it just makes me think that we are not leveraging the existing functional assets that we have in the two districts. We have, by my count, at least 4 schools that are under 50% utilization. And one of the solutions in these solution sets is to vacate yet another in pursuit of a joint new capital expenditure option. So I know these are frustrating and they're very complicated questions because we are divided by distance in terms of where these assets sit. The other part of it is I am willing to stipulate that the educators can figure out the middle school issue. I think it would have been a great service if the educational subcommittee had kind of divined some of this. I thought the last meeting was very enlightening with the comments of the things we heard. But it also calls to mind that when you're doing anything like this, you're going to have to compromise. And there are going to be times where you need to study and come to a conclusion about the things you want to give up or you're not going to have going forward. Other areas of concern. I want to disabuse most of us about this notion of savings. We were told initially, don't really expect them. The report itself says it is dubious that you will have a lot of savings unless you close schools and cut heads. The other part of the savings question is that we show between 175 and $3 million of savings, and then immediately we say it's reinvestment money. It cannot be both. Savings should be defined only as monies that are remanded back to the taxpayer. If it's reinvestment, it's reinvestment. I would just like to see some of that cleaned up, and I would like to see a little bit broader thinking in terms of the underutilized assets. And one of the things that really resonates with me, coming from merger and acquisition activity in the private sector, is that in business, you do something like this, there is always a way to unwind it. But in public education, if we go down the path, there will be no unwinding in a very long time. So I want to make sure that we have considered more options, and we have looked hard at how could we utilize the existing assets that are in the two districts and maximize their use. And the frustration is we're hemmed in by travel time, and we want something like CVTE to be a reality, and we're hemmed in by Chapter 74, and we may not be able to use the in-field version. So there are a lot of things that are quite bothersome to me personally about how this is all kind of coming out. And the final thing I will tell you is that I have discussed this with the finance committee that I sit on in Egremont, and they are in no way prepared to make any kind of recommendation or statement until they see more cost numbers, not capital costs. Whatever they are, they are. It's the ongoing operational costs. I look up at Pittsfield, which has a $69 million budget, $49 million of which is subsidized by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So the taxpayers of Pittsfield essentially foot the same amount of money that the taxpayers of the Southern Berkshire Regional School District are paying in for their system. So I want to make sure that we're clear about how all this plays out, both on the capital side, but very definitely on the operating expenditure side. There have been floated publicly in editorials this notion of a one-size-fits-all tax per 100,000 of assessed valuation. I can tell you that the Finance Committee in Egremont cringed when they read that article. So there's a lot of questions, and most of them have to do with what would the structure of an 8-town agreement look like, and can we begin to get any handle on how that would all mesh with the things that we've been discussing.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. I've been keeping a list as people's hands popped up. So the order I have is Colin, Audrey, Tara, Don, Bonnie, and Peter. So with that, Colin?
Okay, thank you. So I'm just keying off of what Jane said and then now what Tom said. And I guess my big question originally, which was I was sensitive to some of the things Jane said, when we get to this vote, we're picking one of the options. And my question is, when is it time to decide to pick one of those options? And a lot of the detailed questions that both Jane and Tom are asking about, aren't those going to get flushed out once we start to study an option? So are we asking all these questions that we want to know about all these options, but we can't answer those questions until we pick one and study it? So I don't know. My question is, when do we start to vote on this and decide? And if we pick one, as Jane says, are we broadcasting that well, that's the one that everybody wants, and there's no question. Can we change our mind if we get down the road on the one we picked and say, wait, this is not looking right? We need to put on the brakes and maybe take a side study here and see if there's something we want to change about this option. So that's my question. When do we vote, and can we, once we pick something, can we sort of go on a side expedition and change things?
I don't know if Jake or anyone has an answer to those two questions. Lucy?
Yeah, I can answer it because I talked about it at the last meeting, Colin, and you weren't there. So what we would be voting on now is the option we think holds the most promise based on the information we currently have. I, for one, have a lot of confidence in our very skilled research team and the models that they put together. And I am confident that the assumptions are as good as we're going to get in terms of what's going to happen to enrollment, what savings are possible, etc. But for those who have questions about that, to the extent you didn't ask them already, and of course you've had 5 weeks to get those 20 questions, Jane, over to Jake and have them responded to. But if you have remaining questions after we take a vote, whether we do it today or we do it in 2 weeks, there's plenty of time to test the assumptions, to rerun the models with other variables, to reverse course if it's determined by a majority of the planning board, Colin, that the models are inaccurate, that the numbers are inaccurate, that the potential savings, and I disagree with Tom on this, I think the report was very clear that there are savings that are possible and actually likely with a merger of the high schools, but then it would be up to the school committee to determine what to do with those savings. You can either reduce the burden on the 8 towns of the district, or you can reinvest those savings in other areas. But I don't think there's any question that by rebalancing class size, which will be done with a merged high school and will result in the need over time for fewer teachers to take care of the current offerings, freeing up money to provide more offerings, reinvesting in education, or returning money to the towns, or some combination of both. And I think the report was very clear on that point, Tom. There are monies that will be saved by the merger, and then it will be a policy decision whether that money is returned to the towns or reinvested in education. But directly in answer to Colin's question, yes, this vote would be a vote to select from among the 7 scenarios the one that this board believes holds the most promise. Then we take the deep dive and we test all the assumptions again, and we get all the questions that haven't been answered. And we draft a proposed regional school district agreement to present to the finance committees in Egremont and elsewhere, so that the questions of how governance is really going to work and how the assessments are really going to work is presented in a concrete way. We can't do that until we select our preferred model. And that's the vote that I'm suggesting, at least, is the one that we should move forward with in the near future, either today or in early May.
Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate it, and I apologize that I wasn't at the meeting, but based on some of the comments in the meeting today, it sounded like maybe others needed clarification on what the vote meant.
Yeah, thank you for raising the question.
Thank you both. Okay, Audrey, you are next. Thanks for being so patient.
That's okay. There's a lot being said and very good and valid points. And even when I think I'm sure of my decision, I hear somebody who brings something up and makes me ponder about it and the need to reflect some more. But that being said, if there is so many up in the air questions about these models, and obviously about 2 or 3, can we at least decide today which model to take off the table? That's it.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Tara, you are next from my list.
Okay, I'm going to step back after listening to Roger, Colin, Don, and even Kimberly on the option 3 or scenario 3. Thank you for all your input because it's very valuable, and I agree with a lot of what you said. So I think I could step back from that model and probably focus more on scenario 2 at this point. I want to just step back a couple of minutes with a couple of things that have been talked about over the last few facilitated meetings and some of the things that came up. And one of them was that there would be a loss of opportunities and programs if there was this merger. I don't quite understand how that would happen. Each school has certain things that they're doing and programs that they're doing and specialty programs that they're doing, and they're doing a really good job of it. And I don't understand why any of that would be lost by doing any kind of a consolidation merger. I think that all it would do is give more kids more opportunities, and it wouldn't repeat one district doing what the other district's doing at probably a savings, or even more grant money might be available with more children involved. There was a discussion about making the, having, I guess what it was said was, basically it looks like Berkshire Hills is taking Southern Berkshire over. And I don't look at it that way. I think if it becomes a new campus, it'll have a new identity, and everybody would get an opportunity to say, hey, we'd like to name it this, we'd like to do this, whatever. But, moving ahead, it would be a new facility, a new campus, a whole new identity for the kids. It's not going to be that anybody's going to lose a specific identity. It will be a new identity moving forward, and I think the kids would have a great time figuring out what that identity would be. Both Jane and Bonnie last time said that they had heard that the Southern Berkshire kids wanted to have more interaction with other kids. And here's a great opportunity to give more interaction with the other kids, bringing more kids in and letting more kids do, things together. This is a great opportunity. I don't see a downside on that. Basically, I think we need to all be proactive to what's going to happen in the future. There's a lot of hypotheticals of what will happen with the Berkshire Hills District and the new school that they're going to build, or potentially going to build, want to clarify that. But there's a lot of things that could be happening there. And I think personally, myself, and I'm not speaking for anybody else, I would love to be proactive if we're going to go into that situation and not look at it in the hindsight, say, gee, I wish I had an opportunity to say, or I wish I had an opportunity to add this information or suggest this. I think I'd rather be in a proactive state moving forward on that. In response to to Tom's saying, you know, the operational costs, he's absolutely correct. The operational costs are continuing to go up, and they're only going to continue to go up, and the student are declining. We all know that. The towns can't afford it. They cannot continue with this uphill climb. It's just not sustainable. In the future, it's just not sustainable. At some point, the residents and people are going to stand up and say, we can't do this anymore. It's just too expensive. And I agree totally with Colin that if we don't pick a model and move forward, we'll never answer any of these questions. The questions that we're all asking here tonight are valid questions. Everybody has a valid question and has additional questions. But I agree. If we don't pick some model to go forward on, we'll never know what the operational costs will be. We'll never know what the cost will be for, you know, anything that we're going to do. So I think we really do need to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bon. Tara. Don, you're next.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion. And the reason I'm going to make the motion is that I think we have to keep in mind that under our own model, we don't have any more money for investigation of further detail of all the possible options. Our only option within our financing is to choose one. Do we have total information for that? Of course we don't. You never have total information. But we have enough information to be able to say which is the most likely to work out. And that's two, and therefore I move that we accept the recommendation of Jake and approve two for further research.
Lucy, I'll turn it back over to you.
I will second that motion. Lucy, you're muted.
Okay, Steve, were you the second?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask Don and Steve whether they will agree to hold their motion until we've heard from the folks that had their hands up before the motion was made. Because once that motion is made and seconded, our facilitators are no longer facilitating the meeting. And I just think it would be helpful if we could get to Peter Dillon, Jane, who else had their hand up?
I still had Bonnie, Peter Dillon, Jane,
and
Peter T.
Okay. Don, are you okay with that? And Steve, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Steve, are you okay with it?
I am okay.
Okay. So let's just get through that group and then I will take over the meeting.
Okay. So we'll hear from Bonnie, Peter Dillon, Jane, and Peter. Peter T, your hand's not up anymore. So
yeah, no, I'll save the time for the discussion of the motion.
Okay, thank you. All right, Bonnie.
This is pre-motion, what I was going to say. Being a lifelong educator, I always enjoy listening to, not enjoy, but learn from people like Tom and Don with a different approach. I have two major areas. One, we received the FAQs from Jake, and I went through it, but have not had time to go through all the questions I now have, where I thought I had answers, and that FAQs really raised a number of issues for me that I really believe we need answers to. I don't know, since we just got it, whether other people have had time to really digest and peruse it, but Jake and his team did a fantastic job on it, but we need answers there. And the other major area is we're a group of 23, 24, whatever the number is. We have not had what we promised in terms of community involvement. I personally don't feel, especially after receiving that document, I don't feel comfortable at all that I have the answers to be making a decision. I mean, obviously, I really wanted straightforward, a formal vote on a collaboration, not willy-nilly, but a real formal collaboration. I am very, very, very uncomfortable with the information that we have to be able to take a vote now. And those are my comments. My question is, Lucy, to you, the difference at this point and when it would take place to have a motion to postpone or a motion to table. So if you could explain the protocol on that.
Yeah, it's the protocol I explained at the beginning. Once I accept Don's motion and Steve's second, there will be a seconded motion on the table. And then if someone wants to make a motion to postpone or to table the motion, that's when that motion would be made. So not right now. After.
No, right? I wanted to know the effect that I understood all that.
Okay.
What is the difference in the effect of those two motions? Table and postpone.
You know, I don't think there needs to be a significant distinction, but whenever a planning board member makes a motion, if such a motion is made to either table or postpone, they should explain what it is exactly they're proposing. Are they proposing that the motion be tabled indefinitely? Or are they proposing that a vote be postponed until May? Or are they proposing that a vote be postponed until certain additional community convenings take place? You can specify whatever you want in your motion if you're going to make such a motion. But that's not the purpose of the facilitated discussion right now. Let's just get through that and then we can, okay.
Thank you. All right, Peter Dillon.
Thanks. I'll try to be quick on this. This group of 24 people plus Beth and I, and more recently the union folks have been meeting for 2+ years on this, and this is extraordinarily complex. And in some ways, the moment I walked into my district, I've been involved in some iteration of this, though not as nearly as sophisticated as it is now. I agree with a lot of what's said and disagree with some of it, but I think it's very important that this group move forward with some sort of preferred option so we can dig deeper and meaningfully engage the community about the potential impact of this, because the number of options is even complex for the people on this call, and we've all been doing this for 2 years. So imagine somebody jumping into the conversation late and trying to make sense of all of this in some meaningful way. By us narrowing down to one possibility, it affords them an opportunity to have access and make meaning of it, and then go deeper and answer more questions, and then we see where the chips fall.
Thanks, Peter.
Sure.
Jane?
All right. When I read the answers to the frequently asked questions, it's not that I needed to ask more questions. I need other people to answer those questions because we only have one side of a group of people who are very dedicated to this process and are clearly dedicated to the model that they picked. They dismissed collaboration, which I think deserved a lot more. I know that the board voted it down, but I feel like the opinion of our research team has become more important than a bigger, more creative view. This idea that we have to pick a model, I'm not sure where that came from. I don't see why we can't go forward with what we now know and say, okay, we like the idea of starting with a collaboration for a year or two. I'm just throwing out some verbiage here. And then some of these parts of a merger sound really useful. I think we've been made to feel that we have to come up to work within a rigid structure. And to me, we are short-sighted. And finally, I've been talking since the beginning 2 years ago when we lost the ability to have relationships with each other because we have not had one in-person meeting in over 2 years. I think it's foolhardy to have any kind of a vote until we're in a room with each other and we can see who we're working with. I feel that these facilitated discussions, we've gotten a little closer to being honest and not being reprimanded for saying things that other people don't agree with. So I think collaboration was got short shrift. I know that Robert did a good job putting it together, but I think the reason it failed in the first place was because this process started and we dropped continuing working on a project that we had intended to do. So the dismissal of Mount Everett as a place where kids can learn by the research team and assumptions that everything has to be on the same campus and these things that I don't think I had the opportunity to argue with every point because, as you know, I'm the one who is always trying to bring up another point of view. So I feel that certainly we're not obligated to vote tonight. I know people are impatient, and the last thing I want to bring up is let's be honest about the timetable here and how it relates to Berkshire Hills building plan. And I would like somebody to convince me that we're not moving this fast because we need to do this for Berkshire Hills. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. All right, Lucy, I'm going to turn it back to you since you have the motion on the table.
Okay. So the motion on the table, which has been seconded, is for the board, and correct me if I've got this wrong, Don, for the board to select as the preferred model A2, which is a single K through 12 district of the 8 towns with a merged 9 through 12 high school to be built on the campus of the current Monument Mountain High School. Is that a correct reading of your motion?
Exactly correct.
Okay, and
Exactly
Steve,
correct.
is that a correct reading of what you understood to second?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so now I'm going to open the floor for discussion of that motion.
Lucy, I would like to make a motion to postpone.
Second. Well, okay, I'd like you to clarify what you mean by postpone.
Well, according to Glenn Kuchar, a postponement needs to have a final date for the vote, and he says that the window that's allowed is 60 days. So I would like to pick that number, that we would come back for a vote in 60 days. During this time, we would have a chance to meet with our communities, possibly bring in some fresh ideas and answers to our questions, and that we would work together in person as much as possible to build these relationships that we do not have with our colleagues from the other towns, because I think we're in a very precarious position if we go forward without that.
Okay, so the motion is to postpone a vote on the motion that's on the table for 60 days. Is that correct?
Well, up to 60 days. I'll make it a little more flexible.
Okay. And Bonnie, is that the motion that you seconded?
Correct.
A motion to postpone for up to 60 days, the vote on the motion that's on the table.
Lucy, I have a question of process.
Yes.
And I don't know the answer. A motion to table is not debatable. I don't know if a motion to postpone is debatable.
A motion to postpone is debatable, according to Glenn. So we can discuss it.
Okay. I'm going to allow discussion on the motion to postpone. Colin Smith?
If we're going to postpone and everybody, or not everybody, sorry, there are several people that have said, I want more information. I'd like to define what we're going to do in those up to 60 days to get those questions answered. And so we can make a, we can vote. Jane had made several suggestions, but do we have the money to do more studies or whatever needs to be done to answer those questions? Who's going to do that? And when is it going to be done by? I'm sorry, I'm throwing all these questions out, but simply a motion to postpone isn't good enough for me. I want to know what we're going to do in those 60 days to answer the questions that people have.
Okay. I'd like to get discussion on the motion to postpone and not have back and forth on the standing motion at this point. So take your point, Colin. Good question to ask. Do want to point out that we have a June 30 deadline for expenditure of our remaining state funds. So if we postpone for 60 days, that takes us to June 24th, which leaves 6 days to expend remaining funds in the kitty that we have from the state. Steve Bannon.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I'm against the motion to postpone for a variety of reasons. One is that even the discussion of collaboration, as much as I'm not against collaboration, this committee took it off the table, which I supported. And so that shouldn't even be part of our discussion. The other thing is I think in order for us to answer the questions, we can't do that without narrowing down our options. That just to continue to talk for another 2 months and spread it out among all the options, we still won't have all the answers. I think the point of this group was to narrow it down to one option and be able to really hone in on that option. And maybe change our mind once we've done that. But I think a motion to postpone is just going to waste our time.
Okay, Bonnie?
Yes, I do know that collaboration has been taken off the table at this point. However, I don't know if everyone, after reading or has had the chance to read everything that Jake prepared that we just got yesterday on the FAQs, will have a number of questions that may not require additional research, but by getting answers can give us more clarity and direction. So I'm being, clearly straightforward. Most everyone knows where my sentiments lie, but even within that, I feel that we need greater clarity. I think I go back to some of the things that Tom Burkle raised. There's information that probably Jake has already. And I'm not asking, and I don't know if Jane is, and in postponing, not asking for a new research document, but some answers to what was raised on by the FAQs yesterday.
Nadine?
I feel that if we were to maybe dig a little bit deeper into scenario number 2, some of the concerns and questions would be answered. And I give an example of, if we were to look specifically at a design and, design and develop a model, to look at initial analysis of transportation, which is a huge question for everybody, special education, specialized services, finance, obviously, is important, and policy. To be able to participate in the design and educational visioning of what this new high school could be, I think is an opportunity that will also answer some of these lingering questions. I cannot get rid of the feeling that CVTE is something that not only our students need, but our community needs desperately. And I think it's critical that we don't postpone this vote, that we do narrow in on a particular scenario, an option, and dig deep on it, and then figure out if that's the right way to go or not. We're not going to know that unless we can take apart one of these scenarios. And to me, I think that's the only way we can go about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. John Silbert?
Yeah, I'd like to call the question if that's possible.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay. I don't believe that is debatable. So we're going to call the question on the motion to postpone. Charles Ketchen. Charlie, you still on?
I'm here.
Okay. How do you vote on calling the question?
No.
Wait
a minute. I'm confused here, Lucy. What?
Okay, calling the question means we're not going to have any more debate on the motion to postpone. We're going to take a vote on the motion to postpone.
I'm in favor of the motion not to postpone, but to call it, make the vote tonight.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're in favor of calling the question, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. George McGurn.
I'm in favor of calling the question.
Tom Burkle.
Yes.
Danelle.
No.
Deb Phillips.
Yes.
Peter Taylor.
Yes.
Steve Bannon.
Yes.
Don Coburn.
Yes.
Sorry, Don?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, John Silbert.
Yes.
Laura Rodriguez.
Yes.
Susan Smith.
Yes.
Tara White.
Yes.
Jane Burke.
No.
Colin Smith.
Yes.
Nadine Hoover.
Yes.
Bonnie Silvers.
Yes.
Patrick White.
Yes.
Sean Stephen.
Yes.
Marie Ryan.
Yes.
Roger Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Molly Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, so the question is called, we're going to vote on the motion to postpone. So the motion to postpone is a motion to postpone the vote on Don Coburn's motion for up to 60 days. So I'm going to call for the vote on that. Charlie Ketchen, are you in favor of postponing for up to 60 days?
No.
George McGurn,
Yes.
Tom Burkle,
Yes.
Danelle,
Yes.
Deb Phillips,
Yes.
Peter Taylor,
No.
Steve Bannon,
No.
Don Coburn,
No.
John Silbert,
No.
Laura Rodriguez,
Yes.
Susan Smith,
No.
Tara White,
No.
Jane Burke,
Yes.
Colin Smith,
No.
Nadine Hoover,
No.
Bonnie Silvers,
Yes.
Patrick White,
No.
Sean Stephen,
No.
Marie Ryan,
No.
Roger Kavanaugh,
No.
Molly Thomas.
No.
Okay, so the motion to postpone has failed. So we're back to discussion of the original
Can you give
motion.
us the totals on that, please?
I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor and the rest opposed.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to the original motion. Is there further discussion on that? John Silbert.
I'd like to call a question.
Please repeat the motion.
The motion is for the board to select as the preferred model, the research team's recommended model A2, which is a single K through 12 district of the 8 towns with a merged 9 through 12 high school to be built on the campus of the current Monument Mountain High School. John Silbert called the question. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second.
Okay, we're going to take a vote on calling the question. Charles Ketchen,
In favor?
George McGurn,
Yes.
Tom Burkle,
Yes.
Danelle Kelly,
Yes.
Deb Phillips,
Yes.
Peter Taylor,
Yes.
Steve Bannon,
Yes.
Don Coburn,
Yes.
John Silbert,
Yes.
The vote.
Laura Rodriguez,
Yes.
Susan Smith,
Yes.
Tara White,
Yes.
Jane Burke,
No.
No, she voted with us.
Colin Smith,
Yes.
Nadine Hoover,
Yes.
Bonnie Silvers,
Yes.
Patrick White,
Yes.
Sean Stephen,
Yes.
Marie Ryan,
Yes.
Roger Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Molly Thomas.
Yes.
So calling the question is carried. So now we're going to vote on the main motion. Shall I repeat it again? I will. The motion is for the board to select as the preferred model, the research team's recommended model A2, which is a single K through 12 district of the 8 towns with a merged 9 through 12 high school to be built on the campus of the current Monument Mountain High School. Charles Ketchen,
I'm in favor.
George McGurn,
No.
Tom Burkle,
No.
Danelle Kelly,
No.
Deb Phillips,
Yes.
Peter Taylor,
Yes.
Steve Bannon,
Yes.
Don Coburn,
Yes.
John Silbert,
Yes.
Laura Rodriguez,
No.
Susan Smith,
Yes.
Tara White,
Yes.
Jane Burke,
No.
Colin Smith,
Yes.
Nadine Hoover,
Yes.
Bonnie Silvers,
No.
Patrick White,
Yes.
Sean Stephen,
Yes.
Marie Ryan,
Yes.
Roger Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Molly Thomas,
Yes.
and I am a yes. So the motion carries.
Would you give the number again?
Yeah, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 no's. Rest in favor.
Thank you.
How many in favor, please?
All the others who voted.
I believe, Lucy, it was 16.
Yep.
15 or
Somebody
16.
can check that.
16.
It is
was
16. Yep.
Okay. I think we did a lot of work today. I thank everyone for their patience. We do have a meeting on what's the date, Jake? May 9th?
May 9th.
May 9th. I want to thank our facilitators, Cindy and Annie, for their expert assistance and delivery of 3 very fine meetings over the last month or so. We couldn't have gotten through this without you, so thank you. Thank you to the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service for agreeing to provide this service to us. I also really want to thank our union representatives for participating in this process. Your participation was really invaluable to us, and we very much hope that you will stay involved, stay engaged, keep coming to these meetings, and keep giving us the benefit of your wisdom. I also want to thank the research team for the terrific work they've done over the last 9 months. I hope you stick with us as well. And I really appreciate your patience with us and your understanding of how difficult it is for us to get some of these concepts, and how good you've been at explaining them to us. Sean, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I know Jane is concerned with, she's got a bunch of questions. I'm hoping that she'll send those questions to the members of the board the next couple of days so we can take a look at them and maybe be able to provide some answers.
Yes, to us and to the research team, so that they can be prepared to start answering the questions that any of us have that haven't yet been answered. Jane? Okay, I'm gonna accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we've got everybody jumping at
Unanimous.
that. We'll take Tara as the person making the motion and John Silbert as the person who seconded. Charlie,
Yeah.
George McGurn, Tom Burkle,
Yes.
Danelle, Deb Phillips,
Yes.
Peter Taylor,
Yes.
Steve Bannon,
Yes.
Don Coburn,
Yes.
John Silbert,
Yes.
Laura Rodriguez, Susan Smith,
Yes.
Tara White,
Yes.
Jane Burke.
I'm wondering why you didn't answer my question before this started.
I called on you, Jane. You didn't respond.
I asked you a question. Oh, sorry. I wanted you to answer whether it's an open meeting law violation for me to send what was asked of me.
Yeah, you should send that to Jake, not to the full board.
That's what I thought. And secondly, I wanted to publicly ask for the subcommittees to be brought back together. And then I'm okay with closing the meeting.
Okay, so you're a yes on the motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Okay. Colin Smith,
Yes.
Nadine Hoover,
Yes.
Bonnie Silvers,
Yes.
Patrick White,
Yes.
Sean Stephen,
Yes.
Marie Ryan,
Yes.
Roger Kavanaugh,
Yes.
and Molly Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye, all.
Bye, Cindy and Annie.
Thank you.